Hey everybody, this is David from Flash by VCycleNut. Whether you're on your bed streaming me to your big TV or sitting in your cubicle at work with your phone turned around so nobody can see you're watching motorcycle videos, no matter where you are, greatly appreciate spending some time with me. So today I'm going to do a video about my tuning process and my street tuning and why it is a better process. I have finished up the street tuning portion with the Toast exhaust, so I'm going to give you the walk around so you can take a look at it. And so it was really good timing before I put it on the dyno and do the dyno portion of tuning. It was a good time to make this video. It's a video I've been tooling around in my head with for a while. And then I had a conversation with a customer this morning for about an hour. He had one of my competitors' flashes first and now has mine, and was just really impressed with how much better the bike behaved in most riding conditions. He was like, well, I really can't tell the difference at full throttle, but when I'm riding the bike around town, when I'm on my favorite twisty road, the bike is just less buzzy and smoother. The throttle response from on to off is smoother, and it's just a better connection to the right wrist to the rear tire. And at first I was just like, yeah, well, that's because I do road tuning. And he was like, yeah, I don't quite understand what that really means. So literally talked to him for like an hour, and he was like, well, so it sounds to me like the other companies aren't really doing the full job. And I was like, I ain't never really thought about it like that. But yeah, I guess you could kind of say that. And sure makes a great title for a video. And now I'm making that video, and now you're watching the video. So it's kind of the full life cycle of YouTube, right? Somebody throws out an idea, talks about it, and then we make videos. So that's what this video is going to be about, and why, if your tuner is not using street tuning, then they are only doing part of the job, and I'm going to show you why. I'm standing on top of my dyno, and I pushed the drum that the rear tire usually sits on, and I spun it with my foot, and you can see it will just keep spinning and spinning. As a matter of fact, it will spin past when I'm done talking about this and why this is a problem. So I'll start off by saying there are a thing called eddy current dynos, and they're set up where you can put a load on it. And you'll be able to tell if you're looking at an eddy current dyno because the numbers will be substantially less. I think it's like 15-20% less than a normal inertia dyno, which this is a dyno jet inertia dyno. So on the dyno jet inertia dyno, we strap the bike to the dyno, we accelerate that drum, the little computer does some fancy math, we have a cable hooked to the bike that gives us the tach signal, and it takes all this information and it gives us a horsepower, and if we have the tach lead hooked up, it also gives us a torque curve. So this is really good for full throttle or large throttle openings because we're accelerating that drum all the time. But you can imagine with how easy that drum spins, if we try to do small throttle openings or steady state throttle openings, it's almost like we're trying to tune the bike while we're going downhill because this drum is pushing that tire to almost no load. So when we go down the road, there's wind resistance, there's resistance of the tires on the road, there's how heavy we are, there's the pitch of the road. All these things make a difference on the load on the bike. And there are two fuel maps on the bike. I'm going to show them to you, but one of them is a pressure-based map. And that pressure-based map is where the fueling is biased for when we're on steady state and small throttle openings. It's a very, very important map that I spend a lot of time tuning. And it's the map that gives us that really nice initial throttle response and really good manners around town. And unfortunately, where we have to ride the bike most, right? Like, it'd be really cool if every time we got to ride our bike, we just, hey, if it's a drag bike and all you do is go full throttle, then what I'm talking about has no effect on you. But if you ride a street bike, or even if it's a part-time street bike, part-time race bike, like at the racetrack, we just have a lot less conditions to tune to. On the road, we needed to do everything right. And how can you, given that thing's still spinning, try to tune a motorcycle that is a street bike and get it properly tuned with using that and trying to do steady state or small throttle openings? Now, as a tuner with a lot of experience, I can push the fuel maps in the proper direction, but there's no way I can have the accuracy of street tuning without doing street tuning. It's just impossible. Look, it's still spinning. And so that is why when I started tuning, I had no choice. I had to rent a dyno. So what I would do is I would make a bunch of different fueling maps up or a bunch of different flashes with different fueling setups in them, and then I would test them on the dyno. And what I found was when I would load it up on the dyno and check them, that the smaller the throttle opening I got, the less I got back what I did on the road. And then if I set it to how I set it on the dyno, that it just didn't feel as good, the throttle response wasn't as nice. It just didn't feel as good. So let's take a look at some of them settings inside the ECU. There's 3 that I'm going to talk about that if you're not doing road tuning, that they are not possible to set really accurate. And that's fuel mapping, throttle mapping, and deceleration mapping. So hey, it's still spinning. So it is slowing down though, but I think you see the point. I can see the time, how long I've been talking, and it's almost 4 minutes, and it spun for a good 30 seconds before I even started the camera. So yeah, not a lot of load there, right? So like tuning a bike going downhill. So let's take a look at this first fuel map, and this is the throttle position based fuel mapping. And across the top you can see we have throttle position. On the up and down axis we have RPM, and where the 2 boxes meet together, this gives us an injector time. Now, fuel injectors are either on or off. They're never like partially open. So when we increase the number in that box by, let's say, 10%, what it does is it holds the injector open for 10% longer. If we decrease the number, it decreases how long it holds the injector open. You can see that this chart is really big because we can't even see all of it. It literally on the right would go out to 100%, and on this bike it goes out to about 11,000 RPMs. So there's a lot of cells in this table. This chart goes out to 53% throttle. So on our typical dyno run that we do, it's 100% throttle. So there's not one cell on this chart that is adjusted if you only did full throttle tuning. Now, no good tuner is only going to do full throttle tuning, but again, trying to use a dyno that has almost no load on it is really poor for trying to adjust. Look how many adjustments there are at small throttle openings. Why is this? It's because it's important. This is really an important thing to get right to get the bike to feel. When using the dyno properly, it's really important that once you start to accelerate that drum, that you just keep accelerating with more and more throttle, or possibly steady state throttle. I have done tricks where I will go into the ECU and limit the throttle to say 60%. So that when I turn the throttle, it'll just stop at 60% to help me map out some of these. But in the end, I just found it way better to just do the street tuning. Again, because the load is different and it does matter. So that was the TPS table. So now let's take a look at this pressure table. And what I said earlier was that it's biased more towards this table at small throttle openings and steady state throttle. And what I mean by that is these 2 tables overlay each other, and it takes a percentage of each depending on where we're at. The lower we are in the RPM, smaller throttle opening, more percentage from this table versus the TPS table. When we get into the larger throttle openings, it actually doesn't look at the pressure table anymore and looks just at the TPS map that we were looking at earlier. So this map is more important to get right as you go towards more steady state and smaller throttle opening, that initial throttle response, as you roll into the throttle up to 20-25% throttle, the feeling that you get in getting that fueling properly set up. Again, this isn't even the full table. You can see the scroll bars on the bottom, and it's only about halfway over. This is a really large table with a lot of cells, and it's got so many cells because it's important to be accurate with this to get something fueled properly. There is just not on the dyno a way to do this properly with the no load. And I spend a lot of time riding the bike on the road. And when I ride the bike on the road, I don't just ride it. I ride it in a way to hit as many of these cells as possible. So what that means is I will hold on to a gear much longer than I normally will, run it up to almost red line in each gear, because each gear will hit a different part of that pressure table, even though the throttle might be opened to the same percentage and you might be at the same RPM. As the load differs, you're going to hit different parts of this. So it's important to really ride the bike in a way to hit as many of those cells as possible. Again, not possible on a dyno. I did mention earlier that there is a eddy current dyno where you can put a load on it, but in that case, you spend a lot of time trying to mimic the road conditions, where I just, every bike I own is registered and I ride it on the road. I specialize in about a dozen bikes. I don't do every bike out. It's only me. I'm a one-guy show. A little different than some of the companies, some of my competitors, where they are trying to flash every bike out. So, you know, I own these bikes. I ride them. When I'm tuning this table, I don't just look at air fuel. I never just tune the air fuel. On the dyno, I'm tuning to a dyno chart, right? A curve, a power curve. On the street, I use the air fuel ratio as a guide to get me where in the area that I want to be, but ultimately I'm tuning to what it feels like. So I'm riding the bike in all these varied conditions and checking to make sure that it has the response, the smoothness, and everything that I want from a throttle. This table has to be adjusted to get good results. Next up for our viewing pleasure is the Yamaha throttle maps, and I have the boxes outlined so again you can see across the top is throttle position that you actually have your wrist turned. On the up and down is the RPM. Where the two boxes meet is what you actually get. You can see in the top it says electronic throttle valve map, mode 1, gear 5. So they're adjustable by mode and by gear. On the 24 MT09, I adjust modes all 1 through 3, and I leave mode 4 as stock. In modes 1 through 3, I make them all make full power at full throttle, but how they feel into the throttle or all this table that you're looking at is tweaked to give it a more natural feel. If you pay attention to the numbers, you can see you could hold your wrist at the same point, and as the RPMs climb, the throttle will actually open more and more. So of course I go through all the gears and the different modes, setting them up to try to make them feel like what I want it to feel like. You know, on the 24 MT09, mode 1 is still the most aggressive. I make it still a little bit snappy, maybe a little bit too aggressive for some situations. Mode 2 is more smooth and linear. And mode 3 is a little slower than mode 2, but all of them, again, still achieve 100% throttle or 100% acceleration when you turn your wrist all the way. Now, again, these are pretty big charts with a lot of different cells. How can you get a good feeling of what they feel like on a dyno with no load? How, even on a racetrack where you basically just care that the throttle picks up clean and then you very quickly go to 100% throttle, how can you address these in a way and really truly know what they feel like? Now, again, with a lot of experience, like I have, I create some pretty good throttle maps without having to really riding it. But to really get it to that last bit of percentage and really get it fully refined, you need to ride the bike. You just need to ride the bike in real conditions. No way to know what it's truly going to feel like without riding it. The last map we're going to look at is the deceleration map. And you can see there's a much simpler, much smaller map. It is adjustable by each power mode. It's adjustable for each gear. And considering the MT09 revs out to just right around 11,000 RPMs, we don't even use the last two columns. And you may ask, like, why would Yamaha have them in there? My guess is because they're left over from the R1, or they use similar tables. So, again, adjusting decel maps is, again, adjusted to make it feel the most natural that we can. There's not a ton of adjustment in here. But again, how could you adjust this on something with almost no load? It's just not possible, right? So I think it's pretty obvious that your deceleration is not going to feel normal. It's going to be much decreased on the dyno. So again, riding it in real world conditions and tweaking these is the best way, and really kind of the only way you're really going to get it accurately adjusted. So in conclusion, all of these things adjusted and tweaked and fine-tuned with actually riding the bike on the street is how I'm able to achieve that really nice throttle response that comes out with my flash. Just a couple quick notes about deceleration. I think that a few people confuse what deceleration is. Deceleration is when the throttle is fully closed. If it's when you're just rolling off partly and the bike falling on its face, that's just from lean fueling. That's not a deceleration table. That's not injector decel cut. That's just a bike gets hypersensitive to throttle inputs when it's a little bit on the lean side. So these are only used when the throttle is completely closed. So thanks guys for watching. Kind of a long, technical, long-winded, me speaking a lot video. If you made it this far, thank you so very much for watching. Remember to subscribe and like button for more motorcycle related content, and hop on over to my website vcyclenut.com for a truly full job in getting your ECU flashed. Take care guys. Peace.